Hello, all. I just came to give a brief report on what's happening in Flint, the atrocity of Flint. Um, Basically, just a little background. About 2 years ago, the city of Flint decided to switch their water from the Detroit water system to the city of Flint's water system. About a year or so later, GM Motors wrote to the city of Flint and said, the water that we're using is corroding the engines that we're attempting to install. And the city of Flint, said, okay, you can switch your water back, but didn't say anything to the people of Flint. Didn't do anything for the people of Flint. Still not doing anything for the people of Flint. This is a clear example of capitalism gone wrong. To save a couple dollars, now people are dying. There has been over 10 deaths, and there is, there's children who, now have lead poisoning. There are people who have aches in their bodies, and we don't know what their future is going to look like. So the People's Power Assemblies last Sunday, on the 51st commemoration of Malcolm X, called a solidarity action for Flint. We basically want to show them, that we love them and we support them, and by any means necessary, justice for them. The next steps is we're working on building our relationships with people in Flint. We would like to, at some point, call a national action to everyone go to Flint and help Flint politically, as well as, help build or whatever the people of Flint need. It's not for us to tell them what they need. We want them to tell us what they need. So we're, at this point, trying to organize in cities around Flint, Detroit, anyone who can help with that. I'm gonna send around a sign-up sheet. If you have an email address, please write it down. But basically, we need to not forget what's happening in Flint and recognize that, there cannot be capitalism without racism, and we need to smash capitalism. There's nothing good that can come of it. So basically, stay in the streets.
Thank you, Talisa. I also just want to call everyone's attention to our annual International Women's Day march, which should have been flyers on all of your chairs. So that's Saturday, March 5th, starting at 1 p.m. We're gonna rally and then march, and then afterwards there's a celebration of Puerto Rican women happening at 4 p.m. in El Barrio. So check out the flyers and please join us for that. Okay. Oh, and there's work sessions tomorrow. What time?
2 to 6.
2 to 6 here. So here. Okay, so we're gonna have some brief opening remarks, and then we're gonna open the floor for discussion. And the first remarks will be by me. Okay. So at this forum discussing Black History Month, the 50th anniversary of the founding of the Black Panther Party and Workers' World Party's presidential campaign, I want to take a moment to honor our Black sisters and brothers locked behind bars, the ones who are legally denied voting rights in this country. Those disenfranchised sisters and brothers give the truth to the lie of capitalist democracy, and our struggle to dismantle that system is done in part so we can open up those cell doors. There's, of course, our freedom fighter political prisoners, many of which, like Mumia Abu-Jamal, Sundiata Acoli, George Jackson, the Angola Three, and so many more, were or are Black Panthers. We're still overjoyed at the release of Albert Workbox, one of the Angola Three, just 2 weeks ago after being locked up for 43 years in solitary confinement. And if folks want to know more, you can check out our
Tomorrow, there's something coming up.
Okay. So, but I also want to suggest that all prisoners are political prisoners. I'm taking this class on prison expansion right now at the CUNY Graduate Center. And what I'm learning is that the history of US prisons from the late 1970s up till just a few years ago is one of increasingly harsher penalties and expanded mandatory sentences, all done under the rubrics of this tough on crime, election year rhetoric, right? So when states criminalize the strategies that people use to survive while black, to survive while brown, to survive while disabled, to survive while trans, to survive while poor, and when you are in prison for engaging in those strategies, in my mind, that makes you a political prisoner. And that was the great thing about the Black Panther Party, right? Was that they tried to help black people not only to survive, but to see themselves as political beings, to see their very survival as political, and then to take it to the next level, to the level of self-defense and self-determination. And it was that combination, right, the breakfast programs combined with the political education that made them so dangerous, that scared the capitalist ruling class so much that they murdered and locked up so many of our leaders. Another great legacy of the Panthers was their solidarity through struggle. And so I'd like to read excerpts of a speech that was given by Huey Newton, who you saw here, co-founder of the Black Panther Party in 1970. This was, of course, 1970 was, of course, a year after the Stonewall Rebellion. So Huey Newton said, this is excerpt, he said, "We must gain security in ourselves and therefore have respect and feelings for all oppressed people. We must not use the racist attitude that the white racists use against our people because they are black and poor. Many times the poorest white person is the most racist because he is afraid he might lose something or discover something he does not have. This kind of psychology is in operation when we view oppressed people and we get angry because of their deviation from the established norm. Remember, we have not established a revolutionary value system. We are only in the process of establishing it. I do not remember our ever constituting any value that said a revolutionary must say offensive things towards homosexuals. We have not said much about the homosexual at all, but we must relate to the homosexual movement because it is a real thing. And I know through reading, through my life experience and observations, that homosexuals are not given freedom and liberty by anyone in society. They might be the most oppressed people in society." So then he continues, "What made them homosexual? Perhaps it's a phenomenon that I don't understand entirely. Some people say that it is the decadence of capitalism. I rather doubt it." Whatever the case is, we know that homosexuality is a fact that exists, and we must understand it in its purest form. That is, a person should have the freedom to use his body in whatever way he wants. That is not endorsing things in homosexuality that we wouldn't view as revolutionary. But there is nothing to say that a homosexual cannot also be a revolutionary. And then he says, and maybe I'm now injecting some of my prejudice. Quite the contrary, maybe a homosexual could be the most revolutionary. We should deal with the factions just as we deal with any other group or party that claims to be revolutionary. We should try to judge somehow whether they are operating in a sincere revolutionary fashion and from a really oppressed situation. If we feel that the group in spirit means to be revolutionary in practice, but they make mistakes in the interpretation of revolutionary philosophy, or they do not understand the dialectics of social forces in operation, we should criticize that and not criticize them because they are homosexuals. We should never say a whole movement is dishonest when in fact they are just making honest mistakes. Friends are allowed to make mistakes. The enemy is not allowed to make mistakes because his whole existence is a mistake, and we suffer from it. So he says we should be careful about using those terms that might turn our friends off. The terms he uses, the F word and punk, should be deleted from our vocabulary, and we especially should not attach names normally designed to homosexuals to men who are enemies of the people. Homosexuals are not enemies of the people. We should try to form, he says, we should try to form a working coalition with gay liberation groups. We must always handle social forces in the most appropriate manner. So that was Huey Newton in 1970. And now we see that solidarity and intersectionality as a core factor of the Black Lives Matter movement, which stresses the pattern of murder against Black trans women, for instance. And, let us remember here Maya Young and Veronica Banks Cano, two more Black trans women killed within 48 hours of each other just this week. Young in Philly and Cano in San Antonio. I was asked to give some words about how the Panthers affected me as a person born and raised in California. But the truth is, which probably doesn't surprise anyone, but I didn't learn anything about the Panthers until I made it to a four-year college well into my 20s. Had I known about them, about their theoretical underpinnings, their protection, and their love of Black and all oppressed peoples, and their struggles inside and outside of the prisons, I might have been better equipped to deal with my mother's long years of incarceration in California, or the police brutality all my Black male friends seemed to endure as I was growing up. I might have understood that my local struggles were connected to the rapacious global capitalist system. Thus, I feel very fortunate to be alive in a time when we, when I say we, I mean Black people in the streets, on the campuses, and our allies, are living and enacting the lessons of the Black Panther Party. Thank you. So our next speaker is Monica Moorhead, 2016 Workers' World Party presidential candidate, member of the Workers' World Party Secretariat, and a Workers' World newspaper managing editor.
Good evening, sisters and brothers. It's really an honor to be here, to participate in this very, very important discussion on the legacy of the Black Panther Party and also connecting it to the Black Lives Matter movement today because they're very much interconnected. I just want to say, just to open up, that when I was a teenager in Hampton, Virginia, in the late 1960s, it's the first time that I heard about the Black Panther Party. There wasn't a Black Panther Party in the Hampton Roads area, which was, connected by the Chesapeake Bay. But in Newport News, which was very close to Hampton, it was an urban Black community there, and they had a Black bookstore there, and they were selling the Black Panther paper, Black Panther newspaper. And so I would go there on the weekends, to be a part of, the political scene there, and also to help get out the paper. So it was really my first time, first experience in terms of getting to know the Panthers, the friends of the Panthers there, and especially the newspaper, which really helped to shape, my budgeting political consciousness outside of my limited existence living in the South. So, staying in the South, I just wanted to bring up this one historic fact before I get into the main point of my talk, and that is the name of the Black Panther Party didn't really originate in Oakland. It originated in Lowndes County, Alabama.
That's right.
In 1965, before the Panthers formed 1 year later in Oakland. And what was happening in Lowndes County, Alabama? Well, the Student Nonviolence Committee, Coordinating Committee, which is SNCC, which was led by Kwame Ture, who was known then as Stokely Carmichael, allied itself with a group of heroic African-American landless farmers or sharecroppers who openly armed themselves against fascistic repression by the Klan, the White Citizens Council, and other repressive forces that were trying to deny the right of Black people to vote, to register to vote. And this group of farmers formed the Lowndes County Freedom Organization and would often hold rallies in collaboration with the equally armed Deacons for Self-Defense, which was based in Louisiana. So the Lowndes County Freedom Organization used the emblem, the Black Panther emblem, to show that if they were attacked, that their first instinct would be to resist by any means necessary. So just as the Panthers took their political inspiration from the great Malcolm X, so did these Black militants in Alabama and Louisiana in the rural South. So to make that connection between the rural South and the urban areas is very, very important. So I want to sort of move on because other people want to speak, but I do want to pay homage to the Panther women. Because even though, and I hope everybody gets a chance to get a copy of the 10-point program of the Panthers that was issued in October of 1966. I think it's on the table. Yeah, Dolores is holding it up. It's very, very important to read because it was so revolutionary at that time, based mainly on the conditions that black people faced both here and around the world, but also in solidarity with other oppressed and working class people. It was very, very anti-imperialist. And even though the Panther program did not emphasize women's rights, the role of women in the party was very prominent in terms of what the video clip showed. Because when women enter into the Black Panther Party, they made it very clear from the beginning that when they came into the party, they didn't want to play an invisible role by just doing organizational work, as important as that work is. But they demanded to be out front, standing shoulder to shoulders with their brothers, including bearing arms in self-defense, like we saw in Sacramento, and to develop as political leaders. For instance, when Huey Newton was forced to go into exile in Cuba in the sort of early 1970s, he appointed Elaine Brown, who we saw in the video, to be the leader of the Black Panther Party in his absence. And there were also leading roles played by Erica Huggins and Kathleen Cleaver in the party. And Huey understood that it would be a process to win over the ranks within the Black Panther Party on the issues of aligning with the women's movement and the gay and lesbian movement, as Lalani pointed out, at that time, because these movements were fighting for equality themselves. And the Black Panther Party at the time was reaching out to all progressive formations, as was pointed out, the Young Lords, the Young Patriots, the Students for Democratic Society, and many others, in hopes to pulling together a united front to move forward with a socialist revolution in this country. And we could see that in the clip when they were talking to the Young Patriots in Chicago, for instance. And I want to continue what Lalani raised in terms of Huey's very important speech that he gave on August 15th, 1970, and to sort of include the women's part of it. So it's a little bit of an overlap with what Lalani read, but I think it's worth repeating. So this is another quote from Huey. Okay. He says, during the past few years, strong movements have developed among women and among homosexuals seeking their liberation. There has been some uncertainty about how to relate to these movements. Whatever your personal opinions and your insecurities about homosexuality and the various liberation movements among homosexuals and women, and I speak of the homosexuals and women as oppressed groups, we should try to unite with them in a revolutionary fashion. Remember, we have not established a revolutionary value system. We are only in the process of establishing it. I do not remember our ever constituting any value that said a revolutionary must say offensive things towards homosexuals, or that a revolutionary should make sure that women do not speak out about their own particular kind of oppression. As a matter of fact, it is just the opposite. We say that we recognize the women's right to be free. When we have revolutionary conferences, rallies, and demonstrations, there should be full participation of the gay liberation movement and the women's liberation movement. Some groups might be more revolutionary than others. We should not use the actions of a few to say that they are all reactionary or counter-revolutionary, because they are not. Sisters and brothers, the Black Panther Party was the highest organizational and political expression for Black liberation. But of course, it was not a perfect organization. And what organization is perfect? It was ahead of its time, especially in terms of the still dormant working class at that time, which today is more multinational than in the period of the late 1960s. Panther leadership understood the significance of building class solidarity, so the party had no other recourse but to struggle internally with special oppression, especially any sexist behavior, in order to strengthen the party. But they also understood that the biggest threat of all to their existence was brutal repression they faced from the FBI's COINTELPRO and other forms of local and statewide repression. Black Panther women, for the most part, understood where their real liberation lied, as being black and being women. And that is that only a socialist revolution can lay the foundation for systematically eradicating these backward ideas. And they chose to struggle within the party rather than outside the party to help educate, any backward views that existed, in the Panther Party on a daily basis. And the last point I wanted to raise is about the current the Black Lives Matter movement, which was founded by black women, including black trans women, in 2012, following the murder of Trayvon Martin by this wannabe cop, George Zimmerman. And yesterday was the 4th anniversary of the murder of Trayvon Martin. And of course, the Black Lives Matter movement is the latest expression of the Black liberation movement today, especially in the form of fighting police terror and mass incarceration within the historical context of under the Obama administration, the first black president in this country. The Panthers face isolation from various movements and the workers in general, tragically, and were even criticized from even those claiming to be, by those claiming to be revolutionary socialists for being quote unquote ultra left. Our party, especially through our youth wing at the time, Youth Against War and Fascism, made it our top priority to support and defend the Black Panthers' right to exist and grow without governmental repression. And we urge other left forces to do the same. And I'm sure during this discussion, those comrades who are part of Youth Against War and Fascism hopefully will share their views and their stories about this. And you can see the wonderful banner that was held demanding the release, the freedom of Bobby Seale, that was signed by Youth Against War and Fascism in 1969, I believe. So today, Workers' World Party takes the same position with the Black Lives Matter movement, which is on the front lines of fighting the racist genocidal war led by the police. The movement cannot allow the Black Lives Matter movement to be isolated, either by conservative, traditional civil rights forces, and more importantly, from the capitalist state, by the capitalist state, which thrives on divide and conquer tactics. Just as the Panthers have the potential to grow in numbers and political influence if it had broader class solidarity, we have to view the Black Lives Matter movement in the same vein. An important goal of the Moorhead-Lilly election campaign is to use these bogus elections as a platform to help deepen solidarity with this young, dynamic Black Lives Matter movement, regardless of nationality, age, gender, and gender expression, and social status. So I look forward to the rest of the speeches and the discussion on this perspective and how collectively we can help move the class struggle forward for socialism by promoting Black liberation. Long live the legacy of the Black Panther Party, build international solidarity.
Thank you, Monica. Our next speaker is Lamont Lilly, who is our 2016 vice presidential candidate and a leader of the Durham, North Carolina branch of the Workers' World Party.
In January 1971, Black Panther Party co-founder Huey P. Newton declared, "The Black Panthers grew out of the Black Power movement, but the party transformed the ideology of Black Power into a socialist ideology, a Marxist-Leninist ideology." End quote. This statement or reflection was at the core of what the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense originally subscribed to be, and how they originally subscribed to think through a Marxist-Leninist class analysis. Of course they addressed race, and they should have. Not only were they called the Black Panther Party, but they formed as a means of survival, as a means of defense of black lives against police terror. They formed because black folk were getting killed, brutalized, terrorized by the police, and no one was doing anything about it. My point is that they weren't just some reactionary collective full of misguided anger as the corporate media so often portrays them. There was a science to the rage. There was a very special, specific political strain from which they drew. Were the Panthers perfect, as Monica said? No. Were they young, serious, militant, and well-read? You goddamn right. In addition to self-defense, class consciousness, class analysis was at the very forefront of everything they stood for, again, at least originally. Most people don't know this, but it's true. As we just saw Chairman Fred, or Fred Hampton, of the esteemed Chicago chapter state, you don't fight racism with racism. We're going to fight racism with solidarity. You don't fight capitalism with black capitalism. You fight capitalism with socialism. The Black Panthers considered themselves the vanguard, as they very intelligently saw for themselves that class consciousness and class struggle was an essential component, and so was dialectical materialism. What was so brilliant about them is that they were the first black liberation organization that very actively lived these notions, not only in theory, but in a very practical manner, in the ghetto, in the slums, in the hood, on the streets. The book I have in my hands is called Liberation, Imagination, and the Black Panther Party. It's actually edited by one of the sister warriors from the Black Panther Party, Sister Kathleen Cleaver. I want to read just a small excerpt, and please bear with me. I like to, as I'm traveling around now, I like to bring primary text, so when someone tries to argue down what you're saying, you have some proof. And it's just a brief clip, but it's very, very important that I read kind of the whole excerpt to give you a full context. In its ideological transformation, the Black Panther Party subscribed to a Marxist class analysis of society. Panther theoreticians now incorporated race and class in their assessment of the African American predicament. Black Panther leaders accepted the Marxist viewpoint that capitalism produced a maldistribution of social resources due to inherently exploited systems in which the ruling class exploited the labor of the working class. As Marxist-Leninists, the Black Panther Party advocated revolutionary struggle to establish a socialist society. As Marxist-Leninists, Eldridge Cleaver argued that the great definition of Marx and Engels became the mightiest weapon in the hands of oppressed people in the history of ideology. It marks a gigantic advancement of all mankind. End quote. Panther leaders turned to Marxist-Leninism for guidance in the Black Panthers' opposition to racism, sexism, and also capitalism. For example, scientific socialist principles dictated gender equality among party members, as well as interracial and international solidarity. Very lastly, Bobby Seale explained, the fight against male chauvinism is a class struggle that's hard for people to understand. These principles also directed the Black Panther Party to Lenin's vanguard party notion. Black Panther Party members clearly viewed themselves as disciplined, full-time revolutionaries committed to mobilizing support for socialist revolution. Yes, we must dig, we must read. So as we can see for ourselves, and as I've read, Marxist-Leninism was really at its core. We can also see this in what they were reading, along with classics such as the autobiography of Malcolm X and cultural cornerstones such as Blues People by Amiri Baraka. Many of their required readings for their PE or political education classes were very much so focused on the intersectionality of class theory and revolutionary socialism. There was Franz Fanon's Wretched of the Earth, Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels' The Communist Manifesto. There was Kwame Nkrumah's Neo-Colonialism, Class Struggle in Africa, and I Speak of Freedom. There was Vladimir Lenin's What Is to Be Done, which is sitting on that shelf over there. There was E. Franklin Frazier's Black Bourgeoisie. There was Che Guevara's Guerrilla Warfare. And there was Chairman Mao Zedong's Little Red Book. Internationalism and class consciousness were all over their study materials. And so was dialectical materialism. How could it not be? The Black Panther Party was founded in the working class ghettos of Oakland and on to Chicago, Philadelphia, Baltimore, Kansas City, and Harlem. Anyone who has lived in the ghetto or still lives in the ghetto knows that you must be able to adapt to changing situations and conditions. It is a matter of your very survival. It was these very conditions that Huey P. Newton was speaking on when he declared, the Black Panther, quote, the Black Panther Party is a Marxist-Leninist party because we follow the dialectical method and we also integrate theory with practice. We don't expect to find anything the same 1 minute later, because 1 minute later is history. In Mumia Abu Jamal's essay entitled A Life in the Party, he describes the Black Panther Party newspaper as, quote, it attracted the class antipathy of the bourgeois and petty bourgeois, elements who traditionally constituted black leadership. Mumia further states, this voice called for integration. This voice called not for integration, but for liberation through revolution. A new voice that devalued bourgeois behavior and valued political activism against the U.S. empire. End quote. These sisters and brothers were very sharp, comrades. They were very young, and they made mistakes, yes. But most of them were very well disciplined and fully committed. Of course they wanted some black power, and I want some black power too. There were black people living in small nations, confined to, as the Black Panther Party describes, black ghetto colonies, where they were exploited and terrorized by white supremacy, politically, socially, economically, and physically. At the same time, these were the same revolutionaries whose national party motto was, all power to the people, black power to black people, brown power to brown people, white power to white people, Panther power to the Black Panther Party. In reality, the party grew way more and way beyond their imagination and attracted all different types of people. As Black Panther Party co-founder Bobby Seale so carefully notes, the Black Panther Party drew thousands of members into 45 chapters across the country in less than 4 years. With that said, of course, things changed, things evolved. Each chapter was slightly different cities, different regions of the country. And let's not forget the role of COINTELPRO and state repression, which exacerbated their gradual distancing from original principles and ideology. But I think what's most important, particularly for this generation, is that we focus on our time, our attention, and our study on the revolutionary roots of the Black Panther Party. Because it's the roots that keep us grounded, it's the roots that keep us alive, it's the roots that keep us inspired and together, comrades. All power to the people, right on.
Thank you, Lamont. Tall person. Okay, our next speaker is Teresa Gutierrez, Workers' World Party Secretariat member and National Campaign Manager for the Moorhead Lilly election campaign.
I'm really honored to be here. You know, it's tough getting old. You know, you're like Bones Creek, and you're like, what's that thing that you get into and it goes like this? Oh yeah, car, you know. But it was more than a privilege to be alive during the period of the Black Panther Party. Right. And an honor to just get a whiff, to be in the air at the same time when this Black Liberation Organization was at its peak. Now, I was in Texas, so everything revolutionary kind of takes ripples, and by the time you get to Texas, it's not as revolutionary because of the conditions, solely because of the conditions. But in particular in California, the Black Panther Party inspired Latinos, Chicano, Mexicanos in the Southwest, the Young Lords, the Puerto Rican comrades, sisters, and brothers in New York and other places throughout the U.S., to form the Young Lords Party, to form the Brown Berets. And it was with the privilege that many of us in the Southwest donned the Brown Beret to pay homage to the Black Panther Party. When you go home, you should Google Brown Berets and Black Panther Party, and you'll see these beautiful photos of brown and black youth playing security for Huey Newton, demonstrations. Some of the Brown Berets were pallbearers at some of the Black Panthers who were killed by the police. It was in California in particular, but really across the country, the Black Panther Party, clearly the vanguard of the liberation struggles of the United States, were one of the first to implement the Rainbow Coalitions. And they actually, I think, at some point called it if I'm not mistaken, called it a Rainbow Coalition. And you could see that they were guided, of course, by Black Power, the way Lamont described it so well, but they were guided, what I think is so important, by the idea that they wanted to win. They wanted to win liberation. And so being principled, being non-sectarian, being open-minded was so important, and such an important lesson for the left. Now I'm going to talk, I have two assignments. The other assignment is to talk a little bit about the election campaign. And I was trying to remember, this was all, of course, before internet. And I was trying to remember, like, how did we get all the material? And I remember that waiting eagerly for mailings from this third world publication that came out of Oakland. For all I know, it was a Black Panther Party publishing company. I don't know. But this is how you got material, and this is how you learned about Guinea-Bissau. This is how you learned about Ho Chi Minh. This is how you learned about Che. You got things in the mail. You picked up books at literature table. And this is how we spread the word back then. So I think it's really important for you to look at some of these pictures to show, because it so much impacts the struggle today. Now, those were very revolutionary and exciting times. And coupled with the national liberation struggles, coupled with the gay liberation front, coupled with the Stonewall Rebellion, the mass demonstrations against the war in Vietnam, with the Vietnamese sisters and brothers and comrades and friends defeating U.S. imperialism in Vietnam. Many of us, of course, thought that we were going to get to see the revolution, by the time we were 30. That didn't happen. It didn't happen. It was kind of sad. And you fast forward and you see today. And in this process, many, of course, have been broken by the system, broken by COINTELPRO, broken by the drugs that were introduced into our communities to keep us down. And some sold out, so to speak, and some just went on to live their lives. But I know that I was in Texas a couple of weeks ago for the election campaign, and it's very difficult in Texas, but we had 15 people at a Workers' World Party election campaign meeting. And 3 of those people that came were Black Panther Party members. And it was just like, I had never met them. It was the first time that I had met them. And they all looked like me, gray hair, And we sat around and talked for about 15 minutes because we all had to rush to another event. But sitting down, talking to them those 15 minutes, you knew that they were your comrades. That it didn't matter if they were in Workers' World Party or the Black Panther Party, or in this case, they were working with the National Black United Front. They were your comrades in struggle. And that they wanted to work with anybody who wanted to advance the movement. And we had long discussions about Obama. I told them that I voted for Obama in 2004 and why, and that I would still vote for him again, even though 2.5 million of my people have been deported. Because it was a stand against racism in 2004. And the Panthers and I were talking about, they were like, yeah, you're right. In Texas, in 2008. And we were just having these great kind of conversations with them. And right now, we need to be working really hard to intervene as the party, as the Morehead Lily campaign, to do all that we can to advance the struggle for especially Black people. Because we understand the vanguard role. We had a long conversation about whether we should run a African American and a Latino person. And as I mentioned, we had long discussions about this, but we understand that the road to Latino liberation, the road to liberation for all our class, is by having the Black struggle victorious. And this is why we have chosen to run 2 African Americans. But we need your help in this campaign. We're right now in the phase of sort of getting all the literature together, getting the website together, trying to see if we can get on the ballot. Not because we want to be on the ballot, but we want to use that issue to do outreach, to go to Utah, to go to Mississippi, to go to places that are looking for something. We want to do outreach to all the young people that are especially coming around the Sanders campaign, who are many of them from the Occupy Wall Street movement. Where are they going to go when Sanders doesn't get the nomination? When they understand that Rodham Clinton is moving to the left a little bit because of what's going on down below? I mean, who would have ever thought 5 years ago that you would see Hillary Rodham Clinton was Sandra Bland's mother? I would have never thought that I'd see that, But they're forced to do this because of what's happening down below. And so we need to keep putting fuel on that fire. We need to go to the Republican convention in July with Tamir Rice brigades, with brigades in the name of all of those who have been shot by police brutality in Cleveland. We need to go to Philly in the name of the trans sister who just got killed. I'm sorry, I forgot her name, and protest there, and let Sanders and Clinton know that the real revolutionaries are outside in the streets where they belong. And we need your help to do all this. We need your help to make the Morehead Lily campaign a fighting campaign, a revolutionary campaign, a campaign that's going to talk about revolutionary socialism. We must carry on the legacy of the Black Panther Party. We owe it to them to build the kind of society where all the oppressed are free and all of us are liberated. And none of us that are active right now have lost our way. We are confident that maybe we didn't see it when we were 30, but maybe we'll see it when we're 90. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Teresa. Okay, so our last speaker before we open the floor is Larry Holmes, who is the Workers' World Party First Secretary and Chief Political Consultant for the Moorhead Lilly election campaign.
Comrades and friends, I hardly need to say anything after those tremendous reports. I think it's important as revolutionaries, as socialists and communists, for us to reflect on just why it is that the Black Panther Party is so special to us in particular. Every phase of the Black liberation movement that came before them was good and necessary and deserved our support, unconditional support, and was met with repression. The Garvey movement, the Nation of Islam, and so many others, the rebellion against slavery. What distinguishes the Black Panther Party? So many things distinguish it. But if you had to sum it up, the Black Panther Party was by far the most politically and ideologically developed manifestation of the Black liberation movement. So much to the point, and this is why it's so important to us, because of our ideology. So much to the point that they were not only the vanguard of the Black liberation movement in their time, they were moving in the direction, consciously to a certain extent, less consciously to another extent, to becoming the vanguard of the entire working class movement. So it should be no surprise to anyone that the government targeted them for destruction, merciless, systematic destruction. And it's unpleasant to say it, but an important part of understanding what happened to the Panthers is not only understanding what they tried to do, but what others in the progressive movement did or failed to do. This was the 60s, the late 60s and the early 70s. There was a tremendous anti-war movement. 68 was the Tet Offensive. At the big demonstrations in Washington, millions of people, certainly thousands, hundreds of thousands. Every day, what happened in Chicago, the McCarthy campaign, the Democratic Convention, and all of that. Some of these protesters, first and foremost, Workers' World Party and its youth organization, and it's one of the proudest parts of our party's legacy, Youth in War Against Fascism, embraced the Panthers, supported them, and defended them in any way we could, including joining their defense committees when their leaders were arrested and framed up on charges, starting defense committees for them, going to the larger anti-war protests with banners that said, defend Huey Newton, defend the Panthers, free Erica, free Bobby, free Erica, stop the war against Black America. And we agitated about it, and we knew them, and we met with their leaders. We met with their leaders in our office. But sadly, we were a minority. Much of that wonderful movement against the war was not relating to the Panthers. For whatever reason, they were too radical. They defended black people's right to defend themselves with arms. I think in many instances, and this is the case today, that's somebody else's struggle. I'm going to go to the climate demonstration. I'm going to go to this demonstration. But, you know, Black Lives Matter, I'm for that. I hope that succeeds. But that's somebody else's demonstration. It has nothing to do with us. We have to explain this because we can only learn from mistakes, from profound errors, if we look at each other honestly and remember them and say that as far as we're concerned, we will try to make sure that the mass movement does not make those errors in the future. It should come as no surprise to anyone that in this year, a half a century from when the Panthers were founded, the 2016 elections, really the central issue in many ways is racism and who will defend the oppressed against racism, whether it's Muslims or Mexicans or black youth. I saw before I left my home, for this meeting, Hillary Clinton being interviewed, and you would think that she was a member of the Black Lives Matter movement. She is talking so much about black people and what I'm going to do and what I'm going to do. But I'll tell you, the people are not stupid. Two, not one of her events over the last 2 days, not one, have been disrupted by Black Lives Matter. And they come to ask her, explain why in a speech you gave 20 years ago, you call black people super predators. Explain that, Also, explain why you supported, in the first Clinton administration, the 1994 so-called criminal legislation that gave $100 billion to building new prisons, that paid for 100,000 more cops, that came up with 30 more reasons to send people to death row. Explain why you supported the expansion of the prison industrial complex and mass incarceration, She didn't handle it so well. And then, of course, there's Trump. Oh, God. Arguably the bigger problem. And no matter what he says, people are smart. They get what his campaign is based on. His campaign is based on white supremacy. The question he poses, it doesn't matter what language he uses, you see through the language. White supremacy is under attack. And you know that white supremacy is a pillar of U.S. imperialist domination all over the country. So I'm going to restore it. This is the poison that he's trying to infect larger and larger sections of the white working class with. White workers who are losing everything, who are so desperate and so hopeless that they're committing suicide at record rates. And then, of course, there's Sanders, who is becoming a little better. I saw him this morning on TV speaking at an event, and he said, quite rightly so, I do not support the death penalty. I am against it. Hillary Rodham Clinton still supports the death penalty, which is mind-boggling when you consider how she's expecting that, all these black people are going to vote for her. But I'm afraid Bernie Sanders does not go far enough, and he has made a critical error in marginalizing the question of racism and white supremacy in his campaign. Wouldn't it be something if the first thing he said at one of his campaign rallies, and there are thousands of people there, lots of young white people, idealistic, good people, wish we had it. If he would say, first thing I'm going to do, and I'm going to take as much time as necessary, I'm going to explain the Black Lives Matter movement to you, and I'm going to explain to you why you must support it and defend it, and why you must make sure that the police and the FBI do not do to the Black Lives Matter movement what our movement allowed them to do to the Black Panther Party a half a century ago. Wouldn't that be something?
That's a dream.
Wouldn't it be something if he spoke to the white workers who are so desperate that they're abusing substances at record numbers? I hear you. I understand you. But don't blame Mexicans. Don't blame Muslims. Don't blame black people. Don't blame countries where they have people of color. Blame capitalism. Defending the oppressed is always central to our task, and it couldn't be more central today in the context of the elections, in the context of the global capitalist economic crisis. And that is why, among other things, we dedicate our party's election campaign to defending the oppressed unconditionally. Why? Because this is the only road to uniting our class. It's the only road to socialist revolution.
Thank you, Larry. Okay, so we're going to open up the floor for general discussion, comments. You see me playing with my phone because I'm turning on a timer. We want to ask everyone to please try to keep your remarks to no more than 2 minutes, and this will be like the People's Oscars, not the Racist Oscars coming up next week. After 2 minutes, you'll hear a lovely tone to tell you to wrap it up. Okay? Okay, so I've got Josie. Anyone else? Okay, Steve Millies, Sarah Cat, tell me your names. Betty. Okay.